we journey back in time, not to a world of kings and castles, but to a landscape of vast, unforgiving beauty and hidden dangers. Picture the great expanse of the American West in the 19th century. You can see it in your mind's eye, a lone-covered wagon against a fiery sunset, the promise of a new dawn just over the horizon. It's an image of hope, of freedom, of boundless opportunity. But behind that iconic silhouette lies a story of profound hardship, a journey so fraught with peril that survival itself was the ultimate prize. We're going to explore why traveling in the Wild West was, for so many, a one-way ticket to a life of struggle and, in many cases, a veritable death trap. The story may solve mysteries you never had an explanation for, like why a journey of hope is so often memorialized by the graves left behind. The idea begins as a whisper, a seed of discontent planted in the thin, tired soil of your life back east. It's the mid-1800s, and your world feels small. Perhaps you're in a crowded, noisy city like New York or Philadelphia, where the air is thick with the smell of coal smoke and damp rot, and the coffee you've had all winter just won't seem to go away. Or maybe you're on a small farm in Missouri or Ohio, staring out at fields that have given all they can give. Your debts are growing, and the same horizon you've seen every day of your life now feels less like home and more like a cage. Life is a loop of thankless labor, and the future looks like a faded copy of the present. Then the whisper grows louder. It arrives in a letter from a cousin you haven't seen in years. The paper is thin and smudged from its long journey. His words paint a picture of a place that sounds like a different planet. Oregon, California, land of impossible fertility, where wheat grows as high as a man's chest and the valleys are so lush they seem dreamed into existence. Talks of clean, crisp air that banishes sickness and rivers teeming with fish. Or maybe the whisper comes from a pamphlet, printed on cheap paper but filled with expensive promises. It's written by a land speculator or a railroad man, someone with a vested interest in populating the vast, empty spaces on the map. The pamphlet makes the West sound less like a wilderness and more like a pre-packaged paradise, a sort of 19th century spa retreat that also happens to make you rich. All you have to do is get there. You hear the phrase on the lips of politicians and newspaper editors, rolling term that makes your personal desire for a better life feel like a national, even a divine calling. You're right as an American to stride across the continent, to tame the wilderness and make it bloom. It's a powerful idea, turning a quiet desperation into a heroic quest. You start to see the West not just as an escape. You and your spouse talk about it late at night, the words hanging in the quiet darkness of your small room. The risks are enormous, unspoken but felt. Everyone knows someone who went west and was never heard from again, but the potential rewards, they are the stuff of dreams. 1,000 acres of rich, the chance to build a home, a legacy, from nothing but your own two hands. Some are even chasing health, helpless against the ravages of consumption, what we now call tuberculosis, which sometimes prescribe a trip across the plains. They believe the dry, pure air of the high country could literally cure the disease, a prescription of hope against a hopeless affliction. Historians still argue whether the primary driver for most pioneers was a pull of opportunity in the West or the push of desperation from their lives in the East. For you, sitting at your worn kitchen table, it feels like both. You're being pushed by the failures of your past and pulled by the glittering promise of a perfect future. Feels less like a choice and more like a surrender to an inevitable tide. The day you sell the farm is gray and grim. Their face is a mixture of pity and envy. You sell the tools your father gave you, the furniture your mother cherished, the livestock that felt more like family. You watch as your entire world is converted into a small, inadequate pile of cash. That trusty cow you sold for a few dollars was probably more reliable than the wagon you were about to purchase. But there's no turning back now. The break is clean and brutal. You're severing your roots, casting yourself adrift. Your whole existence is now a handful of coins, a few packed trunks, and a terrifying, exhilarating leap of faith. Your supposed extensive farming experience, which really just amounts to 1 or 2 sad-looking potato plants you managed not to kill last season, suddenly feels like very thin armor for the battle ahead. As you turn your back on the only home you've ever known, the gilded dream of the West shines brightly in your mind, a dazzling sun that blinds you, for now, to the long, dark shadows it casts. You're heading toward a new dawn, unaware that the journey itself will be the longest, darkest night of your life. You arrive in what they call a jumping-off point, a town like Independence, Missouri, or St. Joseph, and the name feels chillingly appropriate. It feels less like a starting line and more like the edge of a cliff. The town is a chaotic symphony of controlled panic. It has swelled far beyond its intended size, a temporary city built of mud, wood, and raw ambition. The streets, if you can call them that, are thick with a deep, churning muck that sucks at your boots with every step. They're crowded with people who look just like you, a little lost, a little desperate, their faces etched with a combination of hope and the dawning realization of the scale of their undertaking. The air is a heavy blanket of smells. The sharp tang of manure from thousands of oxen, horses, and mules. The comforting scent of frying bacon and boiling coffee from 100 different campfires. The metallic clang of a dozen blacksmiths' hammers ringing out in a constant, anxious rhythm. And underneath it all is the smell of money being spent, the scent of life savings turning into canvas, flour, and iron. You clutch in your hand a list of supplies, perhaps torn from that same glossy pamphlet that first ignited this fever in your heart. The paper is already becoming soft and worn, a fragile guide in a world of overwhelming choices. You begin the daunting task of outfitting your life for the next 6 months. The list seems straightforward enough. For your family of 4, the guidebooks recommend specifics with an air of scientific certainty. 800 pounds of flour, 200 pounds of lard, 600 pounds of bacon, 100 pounds of sugar, 100 pounds of dried beans or peas, 50 pounds of coffee, and a hefty amount of salt. It sounds like a simple shopping trip, but it's a logistical nightmare. Every shop is crammed. Its owners face a mask of practiced helpfulness. You quickly learn that every piece of advice is suspect. A portly shopkeeper, wiping his hands on his apron, tries to sell you a heavy cast-iron stove. Essential for civilized dining on the prairie, he insists, making it sound like you'll be hosting dinner parties just outside of Fort Laramie. Your gut tells you it's an anchor, not an asset, but his confidence is persuasive. You see other families, wealthier ones, loading ornate rocking chairs, heavy oak chests, and even, in one unbelievable instance, a small piano onto their wagons. Pack civilization itself, not understanding that out on the plains, civilization is measured in pounds, and every unnecessary ounce is a step closer to disaster. These cherished items will become the grim mile markers of the trail, abandoned one by one as the oxen weaken. You find yourself navigating a marketplace of half-truths. You're besieged by men selling all manner of strange, patented contraptions. One tries to sell you an India rubber waterbed, promising a comfortable night's sleep anywhere. Another demonstrates a complex wagon boat, a wagon with canvas sides that supposedly allows it to float across rivers. This quirky fringe of wildwest commerce preys on your deepest fears, the fear discomfort of drowning of the unknown, and offers expensive and almost always useless solutions. You spend your money with a growing sense of dread. The small pile of cash from selling your entire world vanishes with terrifying speed. $100 for a team of oxen, another 100 for the wagon itself. Then the endless sacks of food, the barrels, the tools, the spare axle trees. Each purchase feels final, another stone laid on a path you can no longer deviate from. You see the same anxiety in the eyes of the other emigrants you meet. You huddle together around evening campfires, comparing notes, sharing rumors of shortcuts and dangers. A man tells you he heard the grass is sparse this year. A woman whispers that the water past the Platte River is poisonous. A bond forms between you and these strangers, a fragile community of shared hope and shared fear. The most critical decision you make is purchasing your animals. You need oxen. They are slower than mules and horses, but they are steady, resilient, and can survive on the poor forage of the plains. You stand in a crowded livestock pen, the air thick and hot. You are meant to be a shrewd judge of animal flesh, but you feel like a child. You look for the signs you've been told about. Clear eyes, strong legs, a placid demeanor. You walk between the great, feeling the heat coming off their hides. You choose a team of 4, paying a price that makes your stomach clench. Or are they sick, weak, and destined to collapse in the middle of the vast, empty prairie, leaving you and your family stranded? As you finally lead your new team back to your new wagon, which is now groaning under the weight of your new life, you feel a profound sense of finality. The preparations are done. Your wagon is a tiny, self-contained world, a fragile bubble of humanity about to be launched into an immense and indifferent wilderness, which felt so chaotic upon arrival, now seems like the last bastion of safety. You look at the faces of your family, and you try to project a confidence you do not feel. The dream is still there, but the reality has begun, and it is heavier than you could have ever imagined. You've been moving through a singular, immense landscape. The world has been reduced to the slow, rhythmic plodding of your oxen and the endless green and brown of the prairie. The journey has been a collective effort, your wagon one of many in a long, unified column. But now you're approaching a place of separation, a point where the singular dream of the West fractures into specific and mutually exclusive destinies. You have to choose your path. It's a decision that feels like choosing your fate from a menu, where every option is written in a language you can't quite read, based on maps that look like they were drawn by a man describing a dream he had. This is in a neat intersection with signs. It's often just a subtle divergence of tracks, a place where one set of ruts veers southwest while the other continues resolutely west. You have to place your trust in your guide or your wagon train captain, hoping his information isn't dangerous. The two great choices, the two arteries of this westward migration, are the trails to Oregon and California. They're spoken of like two different personalities. The Oregon Trail is a farmer's path. It's the one that promises not instant riches, but sustainability. The lure is the Willamette Valley, a place described in such glowing terms it seems like a second Eden. The journey is long, a staggering 2,200 miles that will take 5 to 6 months of relentless travel. Its primary danger is its own popularity. During the peak years, it became a great moving city. And with that many people sharing the same water sources and camping grounds, it became a fertile highway for disease. Its perils are a slow burn, the grind of the endless plains, the dwindling of supplies, and the invisible threat of cholera that stalks the riverbanks. The California Trail is the path of the gambler, the man in a hurry. The very word hangs in the air, shimmering with possibility. This trail follows the Oregon route for much of the way, but then it breaks off, plunging south into much harsher, more unforgiving country. Its signature challenge is the infamous 40-mile desert in what is now Nevada. It is a barren, alkali-crusted wasteland, utterly devoid of fresh water or grass. It's a killing ground for animals, and the trail across it is marked by the skeletons of thousands of oxen and the wreckage of abandoned wagons. If you survive the desert, you're immediately confronted with the jagged teeth of the Sierra Nevada mountains, a final, brutal barrier of rock and snow that makes the rest of the journey feel like a gentle stroll. Arguments ripple through the wagon train. Meetings are held at the evening camp, the faces of your fellow travelers illuminated by the flickering firelight, full of passion and fear. A man with a large family speaks eloquently about the rich soil of Oregon, the good school, the solid communities. Another man, his eyes wild with gold fever, waves a letter and speaks of nuggets the size of his fist waiting to be plucked from the streams of California. You see friendships strain and families even threaten to part ways. So powerful are these competing visions of paradise. You might even see a small group, swayed by a fast-talking trapper's tale to shortcut, peel off from the main train. You watch their wagon shrink into the horizon, a profound sense of dread settling in your stomach, wondering if you'll ever see them again. Communication is a strange and fragile thing out here. You pass what are known as trail-side post offices. They weren't buildings, but landmarks, a sun-bleached animal skull stuck on a post, a prominent boulder, or a lone, gnarled tree. Travelers would leave letters tucked into crevices, messages for friends in the train behind them, or news for family. You might find a tattered note that reads, "Made it past the river." It was a mail system powered by hope and the assumption that the next person come along would be decent enough to leave the letters undisturbed. Your wagon train makes its choice, perhaps by a democratic vote, perhaps by the sheer force of will of the captain. The decision settles over you, a mix of relief and trepidation. The dream of gold is extinguished, replaced by the more sober vision of green valleys and hard work. You watch the other wagons, the ones bound for California, take the southern fork. You wave to people who have been your neighbors and allies for weeks, knowing you're seeing them for the last time. Their fate now lies down a different road, with different dangers. As your own wagon creaks forward on the northern track, you've chosen your poison. The vast, undifferentiated prairies behind you and the specific, named challenges of the Oregon Trail lie in wait. You've been on the trail long enough for the novelty to have been scoured away, leaving only the hard, unvarnished routine. You're deep in the Platte River Valley now, the great flat belly of the continent. The world has been simplified into two immense, competing elements: the endless, level earth beneath your feet and colossal, overwhelming sky above your head. You found a kind of beauty in it. The sunrises are explosive, painting the entire dome of the heavens in shades of orange and violet. The sunsets are slow, majestic affairs that make the prairie grass glow like a field of fire. But you're learning that this vast, beautiful sky is not a gentle canopy. It is an arena of violent, unpredictable power, and you are entirely at its mercy. The first great thunderstorm of the plains is a lesson in humility. It doesn't roll in gently. It builds with menacing speed on the horizon, a bruise of dark purple and sickly green that swallows the blue sky. The air becomes heavy, still, and unnaturally warm. The light takes on a strange, apocalyptic quality, not as a breeze, but as a physical shove, a solid wall of air that staggers the oxen and threatens to rip the canvas bonnet from your wagon. The command is shouted down the line. Circle the wagons. It's a phrase you know from adventure stories, a defense against attack. But here, the enemy is the sky itself. The circle creates a makeshift corral for the terrified livestock, hopefully preventing them from bolting in a blind stampede across the prairie, a disaster from which there will be no recovery. You huddle inside your wagon, the thin canvas providing more psychological comfort than actual protection. Then the lightning begins. It is nothing like the distant flashes you knew back home. It is all around you, open ground with vicious. The cracks of thunder are not rumbles. They are deafening explosions that feel like a physical blow to your chest, shaking the very floor of the wagon. In the midst of this chaos, you might witness a truly terrifying phenomenon, St. Elmo's fire. A strange, eerie blue-green glow will appear, dancing on the tips of your oxen's horns, flickering from the metal rims of the wheels or the barrel hoops. It's a discharge of atmospheric electricity, but to you, it looks like the world is being touched by ghosts, a supernatural omen in the middle of nature's fury. Sometimes, the rain is not water. A hailstorm can erupt with even less warning than a thunderstorm, and it's a far more direct assault. You hear a sound like 1,000 pebbles being thrown against your wagon's canvas, a sound that rapidly escalates into a deafening roar. Ice stones, some the size of marbles, others as large as hen's eggs, hammered down from the sky. There is nowhere to hide. The oxen bellow in pain and terror. Your only shelter can be shredded to ribbons in minutes, exposing your precious cargo of flour and sugar to the deluge. You can only cower, listening to the brutal drumming, praying that a larger stone doesn't find its way to your head. Even when the sky is not actively trying to kill you, it is testing you. The sun in this shadeless world is a relentless tormentor. From mid-morning to late afternoon, it beats down without mercy. You once thought nothing of paying a nickel for a shady spot at a town picnic. Now you feel you would trade a healthy ox for the shadow of a single. Heat is suffocating, shimmering off the parched ground. Your skin burns, and the dust kicked up by hundreds of hooves and wheels creates a perpetual, choking cloud that works its way into your eyes, your throat, and the very fabric of your soul. And then there is the wind. It never, ever stops. Nagging presence, an invisible bully that leans on you all day as you walk, slowing your progress. It whips the women's skirts and makes conversation a chore of shouted words. It makes the simple act of starting a cooking fire a frustrating battle of wills. This ceaseless wind is, for some, the most maddening torment of all. It's the source of a condition that people called prairie madness. The combination of the unending wind, the featureless horizon, and the crushing isolation could work on a mind, leading profound depression. Huddled in your wagon or trudging under the oppressive sun, you feel it is both. You're being worn down, grain by grain, by the daily friction of the environment, while always living under the threat of a sudden, spectacular annihilation from above. The sky is no longer a symbol of hope and infinite possibility. It is a moody, tyrannical ruler, and you are just one of its insignificant, weary subjects. You have survived the sky's fury. You have learned to walk with a careful eye for the serpent in the dust, and to sleep with the sound of wolves in your ears. You have faced the tangible, visible dangers of the West and have. But now you come to face the trail's most prolific and terrifying killer. It is an enemy with no fangs or claws, an adversary that's completely invisible. It is a ghost that travels in the water, hides on a shared spoon, and waits silently for its chance to strike. It begins quietly. A man in a wagon ahead of yours, a big, strong fellow who was helping to push a stuck wagon just yesterday, complains of a stomach cramp, blaming the brackish water from the last creek. He is desperately ill, overcome with a sickness so violent and sudden it shocks everyone. This is the hallmark of cholera, the speed of its assault. It is a disease that does not linger. A perfectly healthy person can be reduced to a shell in a matter of hours and be gone by the next sunrise. They call it the Blue Death, and you soon see why. The sickness causes the body to purge all of its fluids in a catastrophic, unstoppable torrent. The result is a level of dehydration so profound it alters the very chemistry of the body. The blood thickens to a sludge, and the skin, deprived of oxygenated blood, takes on a ghastly, bluish-gray hue, especially around the eyes and lips. The victim's skin becomes cold and clammy to the touch. Their eyes sink deep into their sockets, and their features become sharp and skeletal. In the most literal sense, drying up from the inside out. You don't understand that the cause is a microscopic bacterium, Vibrio, thriving in the very water you so desperately seek. Do you remember that stagnant pool from a week ago, the one used by hundreds of people and animals before you? Or the mighty Platte River itself, which serves as both the water source and the sewer for the thousands of immigrants stretched along its banks? The sickness from one camp washes downstream to become the drinking water for the next. The Oregon Trail, during an epidemic year, became a 2,000-mile-long engine of disease. Cholera was the single greatest killer on the trail, with some estimating that in the worst years, it claimed as many as 1 in 10 of all who set out for the West. Panic, cold and sharp, begins to seep into the wagon train, spreading faster than the sickness of the rumors about what causes it, ranging from bad air to eating unripe berries. Based on the prevailing medical idea of the time, the miasma theory, you believe the disease is spread by foul odor or a noxious atmosphere. This leads to a host of quirky and utterly useless folk remedies. People burn tar or gunpowder inside their wagons They wear little bags of foul-smelling camphor or asafoetida around their necks, hoping the stench will ward off the evil vapors. The company doctor, who might just be a farmer with a book, administers his own cures. The prescribed treatments of the day, often involving calomel, a toxic mercury compound, or other harsh purgatives of the medics, actually hasten death by exacerbating the very dehydration caused by the cholera itself. You watch as a sick woman is forced to swallow a foul-smelling concoction that only makes her more violently ill, and you wonder if the cure isn't a greater poison than the disease. The fear is a corrosive acid on the bonds of your small community. You start to view your neighbors with suspicion. You hesitate to shake a man's hand. You flinch when someone coughs. When a family is struck by the illness, other wagons begin to edge away from their campfire, isolating them in their misery. The communal spirit that was so essential for survival begins to evaporate, replaced by a primal instinct for self-preservation. The burials become a constant. There is no time for ceremony, no energy for digging a proper grave in a hard-packed earth. The dead are wrapped in a blanket or a piece of canvas. A shallow trench is scratched out of the dirt. A hurried prayer is said. Perhaps a hymn is sung in trembling voices. And then the body is covered over. You pile rocks on top, but to prevent scavenging wolves from digging up the remains. The trail becomes a linear cemetery. Crude graves of the wagon train ahead of you serving as terrifying markers of the path you now travel. The ghost touches your own wagon. It could be your child, your spouse, the person you have shared everything with. You watch, helpless, as the vibrant life drains out of them, replaced by that awful blue pallor. You hold their cold hand and offer them sips of water that they cannot keep down. The deepest agony begins, because you cannot stop. You cannot take time to grieve. The wagon train must move on. To be left behind is a death sentence. And so, with a heart hollowed out by loss, you urge your oxen forward, leaving a piece of your soul behind in a shallow, unmarked grave on the vast and empty prairie. You have endured the assaults of nature and the betrayals of your own body. You have faced down storms, floods, disease, and starvation. But now you confront a new and perhaps more heartbreaking danger. The circle of wagons, that iconic symbol of unity and mutual protection, is beginning to crack under the immense, accumulating pressure. The community you have relied upon for survival is starting to devour itself. It begins with whispers and resentful glances. The shared sense of purpose that propelled you from the jumping-off point has been ground down by months of hardship. Tempers are frayed to a raw nerve. The wagon train captain, once a respected leader, now finds his authority challenged at every turn. Why did he lead you through this waterless stretch? Why is the pace so punishingly fast or so dangerously slow? The families from Ohio murmur among themselves, believing the captain favors the folks from Illinois. The nightly council meetings, once orderly and productive, devolve into sessions of complaint and bitter argument. The most corrosive acid on the bonds of your community is the scarcity of resources. When the train halts at a meager spring, the wagons at the front of the line get the first, cleanest water. By the time the wagons at the back arrive, the spring has been churned into a muddy mess, fouled by the livestock. The same is true for grazing. The lead animals get the best grass. Burning resentment builds between the front of the train and the back. You're supposed to be one body, but you're becoming a snake eating its own tail. Someone's carefully rationed sugar sack feels a little lighter than it should. An axe left outside, but as the hunger deepens, the thefts become more brazen. A side of bacon, the very currency of life out here, is stolen from a wagon in the dead of night. The accusation is thrown, and the denial is furious. Your neighbors are no longer your allies. They are suspects. You lie awake at night, listening not for Howl the Wolf, but for the footsteps of a fellow traveler intent on stealing the food from your children's mouths. How do you deal with justice in a lawless land? Many wagon trains, in a fit of optimistic foresight, drafted and signed formal constitutions before they left. These compacts laid out rules for everything from guard duty to the distribution of meat from a communal hunt, establishing a framework for a mobile government. You remember signing yours, the ink still fresh, feeling a swell of pride in the civilized society you were creating. That document is likely being used to level a wobbly cookpot, its principles forgotten. When a man is caught stealing, the train faces a terrible choice. A council is formed, and a trial is held around the campfire. There is no jury of your peers, only a collection of exhausted. If he's found guilty, what is the punishment? There are no jails. The ultimate sentence is banishment. To be cast out of the train, alone with a gun and a small amount of food, is to be condemned to almost certain death. The decision to impose such a sentence is agonizing. Some argue for mercy, others for the harshest possible example. The debate itself can tear the group apart. A lesser, but still cruel, punishment is shunning. This grim social tool was a kind of living death. A family deemed to have broken the rules might be sent to Coventry. No one will speak to them. No one will share a fire with them. If their wagon becomes stuck in the mud, the rest of the train will roll on by without offering help. They're socially exiled, still travel with a group, but utterly alone, a ghost family haunting the perimeter. The bonds of kinship and friendship are snapping one by one, replaced by the cold, hard contract of individual survival. The people you once shared your dreams would now look at you with hardened eyes, calculating your worth, your weakness, and the value of what you possess. The circle is broken. Everyone is now an island, and the sea is rising. You have walked beside your husband, your father, your brother for more than 1,000 miles. You have felt the same sun burn your skin, the same wind chap your lips, the same hunger gnaw at your stomach. You have faced the same dangers and mourned the same losses. But as a woman on the Oregon Trail, you carry a separate and unequal burden. You walk the same trail, but you live in a different, more demanding world, one defined by a relentless double shift of labor that begins before the sun rises and ends long after the set. Your day begins with the men's work. You rise in the dark, and while they yoke the oxen and prepare the wagon for movement, you're already at your first tasks, breakfast and packing away the cooking gear. You do not ride in the wagon, for all the reasons of comfort and safety that keep the men on their feet. You trudge through the same dust, your long, heavy skirts collecting burrs and dirt. You help push a wagon out of a muddy rut, your shoulder next to a man's. You carry a toddler on your hip for miles, their weight an ever-present ache in your back, while trying to keep an eye on the older children who might wander into the path of a snake or too close to the riverbank. This is your day's shift, the shared labor of the trail. But when the wagons circle at night, and the men's primary work is done, yours is just beginning. As they tend to the animals or gather to discuss the route, you pivot to your second shift, creating a domestic space in the middle of a hostile wilderness. Your first task is to find fuel. Wood is a long-forgotten luxury. You walk out from the camp, sack in hand, to gather the only available fuel, dry buffalo dung or chips. You become a connoisseur, able to spot a good, dry, burnable chip from 50 paces. You haul a dusty, smelly load back to camp to start your fire. You take the heavy wooden buckets and walk to the designated source, which could be a quarter of a mile away. You wait your turn with the other women, then haul the sloshing, heavy buckets back to your wagon for a pathetic attempt at washing, and for drinking, crouched by the smoky, unpredictable fire, battered by the constant wind. You try to turn the same rancid bacon, weevily flour, and gritty beans into something edible for your exhausted family. After the meal, you clean up, using precious water to wash the tin plates and cutlery. By the dim light of the fire, you pull out your sewing kit to mend a torn shirt of the son or patch the thinning knee of your husband's trousers. Your work is a circle, unending as a horizon. You do all this while encased in the restrictive clothing of your time. Decency demands you wear a corset, multiple petticoats, and long. This attire is not just hot and uncomfortable. It can get tangled in the sagebrush, caught in a wagon wheel, or, most terrifyingly, catch a spark from a fire. But the social taboo against a woman wearing practical trousers is so strong that you and almost every other woman on the trail endure. You are the nurse of the sick, the caregiver for the children, and the emotional bedrock for your husband. You must absorb all the fear and grief of your family and project an aura of calm resilience, even when your own spirit is cracking. Childbirth on the trail is the ultimate expression of this burden. When a woman goes into labor, the train might halt for a day, two if she is lucky. She gives birth in the back of the filthy wagon, attended by other women who rely on folk wisdom and prayer. The risk of death from infection or complications is astronomical. Within a day or two of this ordeal, she is expected to be back on her feet, walking beside the wagon, perhaps with a newborn infant in her arms. The historical view of the trail is often a masculine one, focused on mileage and logistics, but it is the diaries kept by women that provide the richest tapestry of trail life, chronicling the social interactions, the domestic details, and the profound emotional costs. Your own diary is your only confidant, the only place you can confess your terror and your exhaustion. You look at your chapped, callous hands, so different from the hands of the woman you were when you started this journey, and you wonder if the promised land will have enough soap and water to ever make them clean again. The raw, chaotic boomtown slowly tames itself into something resembling a proper town, with churches and schools and planked sidewalks. Settles into a familiar, weary rhythm. You have your small plot of land, your cabin that no longer feels temporary. But you learn that the trail, the great journey that defined your life, never truly ends. It lives inside you, in the quiet moments before sleep. Sometimes, a certain slant of late afternoon light on a dusty field will suddenly transport you back to the plains, and you can almost feel the phantom weight of the miles in your legs. The smell of wood smoke on a crisp autumn evening can bring back the memory of 1,000 campfires with clarity that startles you. You're no longer the person who started that journey, full of naive hope and untested strength, died somewhere back in the plains and was buried without a marker, the one who carries the ghosts. You think of them often, the ones who were not so fortunate. The faces of those lost to cholera, to a misplaced step on a mountain pass, are as clear to you now as they were then, and you think of the graves. Along the main Oregon Trail corridor, there are as many as 20 or 30,000 graves, one for roughly every 80 yards of the trail. A 2,000-mile-long cemetery, most of its occupants anonymous, their stories lost to the wind. You remember the grim, yet deeply loving practice of burying the dead directly in the middle of the trail and then driving the remaining wagons over the spot. It was not an act of desecration, but one of desperation, a final, frantic attempt to hide the scent of disturbed earth from the wolves and protect a loved one's final resting place from being disturbed. The thought of those forgotten souls, their bones literally part of the foundation of the road west. You see the nation growing. You hear the talk of progress, of the great railroad that will soon stitch the continent together, making your own torturous journey seem like a relic of a primitive age. You understand that your personal struggle was a tiny, insignificant part of that grand narrative of manifest destiny. But you also see the price of it all in a way the politicians and newspaper editors never could. You know the cost was measured in human lives, in broken families, and in the destruction of the way of life of the native peoples who were swept aside by the relentless tide of your passage. The survivor are living proof of the dream's fulfillment, but you are also the silent keeper of its terrible cost. You look at your children, and now they were born here in this new land. The vast plains and the towering mountains are just geography, not obstacles that kill. The stories you tell the journey are like fairy tales, full of monsters and hardships that they cannot truly comprehend. You see in their eyes that they are new people, a people of the West, and you feel a strange and poignant distance from them. You've given them a home that was forged in a fire they will never have to walk through. You carry the scars of a journey that, for them, is only a myth, and you wonder, in the quiet of the evening. You do not have an answer, and now the day is done. The memories of the trail, once so sharp and painful, begin to soften with time, the edges worn smooth like stones in a river. The story of the journey, with all its hardship and sorrow, finds its own quiet resting place. Imagine the vast, silent plains at twilight, the great bowl of the sky turning us soft, the air grows still and cool, and a hush descends upon the land. Wind, which once tormented the weary traveler, is now just a gentle murmur through the prairie grass, whispering over the countless forgotten graves. The ruts of the trail, once so deep and raw, are slowly, gently being reclaimed by the earth, fading back into the landscape. The ghosts of the trail are at peace now. The long walk is over. The fever of the dream has broken, and a cool, quiet rest has finally come. The struggles of that distant time can now drift away, like smoke from a long-extinguished campfire, leaving behind only a deep and profound stillness. There are no more rivers to cross, no more mountains to climb. There is only the soft, quiet dark, and the promise of a peaceful, well-earned sleep.